Welcome to the NCDWI Guide podcast, where defenders of the Constitution assemble to prepare for courtroom battle and firm owners gather to develop marketing strategies that will revolutionize the practice of criminal defense. Here's your host, the NCDWI guy, Jake Minnick.
Hello, fellow freedom fighters, and welcome to episode 207 of the NCDWI Guy podcast. On today's episode, I have special guest Daniel Donahue on the podcast to continue our Warriors in the Courtroom series, highlighting some of the young leaders in criminal defense in North Carolina. This is part 7 of our series. This has been a blast of a series to do. I have really enjoyed these conversations with a number of the real killers, the real amazing lawyers in North Carolina. And Daniel does not disappoint on today's episode. If you are a solo practitioner or if you are looking to hang your own shingle, Daniel has some incredible practical advice for how to build and grow your law firm. I really took a lot away from Daniel during our conversation. There is such an incredible learning opportunity on my end when I do these episodes. And this episode in particular just felt like one where I needed to be taking notes. There was so many nuggets that Daniel had to offer. Daniel shares his story with how he got into the law, his family background. He hails from the Outer Banks, which is where he practices. So he's the beach lawyer, the beach DWI lawyer, and shares, I think, some really good encouragement for young lawyers who are looking to go back to their hometown and open up a practice in a smaller county or smaller population county in the state. I think it's some incredible advice. So I really enjoyed this conversation with Daniel, and I am sure that you're going to get a lot out of this episode. Well, Danny, I really appreciate you agreeing to come on the podcast and share with the audience some of the insights into handling cases in the Outer Banks, fun place to be practicing, as well as some of the business lessons that have been learned along the path to success. But would love to kind of just dive in first and foremost and kind of get a little bit of a backstory about kind of how you got into the law in the first place, what led down the path of criminal defense, and then we can kind of get into OBX law and what that looks like. But very much appreciate you coming on the podcast to share your insights with the audience.
Well, I'm happy to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me. It's a great place to be. I've listened to your podcast before, and it's been really helpful for me to hear what others have to say about, especially things like checkpoints or specific, points in DWI law that I just want to hear what others from around the state are doing or how they're approaching things. So thank you for putting all this together.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's been a blast. And just briefly on that point, I literally just listened last week to a prior episode that I had done with James Davis on checkpoints, because we had a mock trial going on as a firm and it was a checkpoint case. And I was like, I'm going to go listen to what James, even though I did it, it was like, it'd been a long time. I think like 2 years back. So it's good to get that perspective.
Out there. It's easy to forget,
Yeah.
For sure. But yeah, so I'm from the area. I was born in Elizabeth City in 1977.
Okay.
I grew up going through the public schools. My dad ran a drugstore at a local mall in Elizabeth City. It was somewhat of a chain. I think it was People's Drugstore. I don't think there were many in the South, but now it's become CVS. CVS bought out all the old drugstores.
Okay.
But I was thinking about this the other day. Part of what made me want to become a lawyer, I think, was just the customer service that I saw growing up in this small business. Back in the 80s, the customer is always right was a big thing.
Yes. Yep.
Client satisfaction was a big thing. If you walk through any retail store, You always find people walking around asking people, how can I help you? Can I help you find anything? And, the phone conversations were much different than they are
Yeah, that's
now.
so true.
So I think I grew up seeing that and not realizing it was part of a training program for a retail industry, just the way things were. So, I worked in that store for years, as long as I can remember, really, breaking down boxes when I was probably 5 or 6 years old, and then, stocking shelves and then getting on the register and stuff. But it was just always the way that place was. And later on, around probably 11 or 12, my parents went out of town and they took me to my Uncle Pat's house, and he was a prosecutor in Anne Arundel County, Maryland, Annapolis, Maryland. And he didn't have kids. He was probably in his mid-40s, and I don't know what he had planned. And it doesn't seem like he had much planned, because he took me to work with him. So on day one, he took me into a government building. He took me upstairs to his office. He immediately starts dictating to his secretary, walking around with his little old tape recorder, like you used to see lawyers do, dropping off the little tapes and stuff. And probably within 30 minutes, he gets a phone call, and it's his buddy downstairs. He says, "Hey, is Danny with you?" He said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, send him down. Tell him to come to my office." He tells me to get on the elevator, where to go. I walk in this guy's office, and he throws a manila envelope across his desk. He says, "Take a look at this." And it is gory murder photos, like,
Wow.
gunshot wounds, dead people everywhere, crime scene tape, all of the stuff that for an 11 or 12-year-old, you're thinking, this is the coolest thing I've ever seen in my life. So I was hooked pretty soon after that. I thought his job was great. The courthouse there, and I don't know if they have any in North Carolina. I don't know about Mecklenburg or even Wake, but they had a cafeteria in the courthouse.
Wow,
And it
that's
was for all
crazy.
court staff, and it was like a school cafeteria. It was a government building. It had that feel. But we went to lunch before we went to court, and we were in this courtroom cafeteria, and everybody was back there shooting shit, making jokes, joking each other, acting like they were best friends in the world. And everybody had a quick wit, was having a good time. We eat lunch, go in the courtroom, and everybody acts like they'd never met one another before. The prosecutors, the prosecutor, the defense lawyers, the defense lawyer, the clerks act like they don't know him. The judge acts like he just wasn't telling a joke. And I thought it was the coolest thing that I'd ever seen. These guys are just going to kind of play their role in this system of justice. And I really got a kick out of that. And I wanted to be a part of it even back then.
Yeah, that is awesome. I mean, what an experience. I mean, I feel like it's so fun to hear everybody's different journey into criminal defense and into the law generally. And sometimes it's like, family background. Sometimes it's, being on the receiving end of a DWI or other criminal charge, or being in an environment where you didn't feel like the law was working correctly. And that to me is just such a cool in terms of what inspired, in a lot of ways, getting into this line of work, because it is pretty, the stuff that we get to deal with. And I don't do any murder cases, so that's never been my path, but the stuff we get to deal with is so interesting to me on a factual level. Like, I mean, it's just interesting. And so I think that there is such a blessing in terms of the type of work that we get to engage in, because it's just entertaining to me. Like, I mean, at the end of the day, there's no dull days at the office. There's a lot of like craziness that's happening.
Yeah.
And so there's a real fun and beauty in that. I mean, it's a lot of interesting stuff constantly going in and out. I love the reflection back to, kind of the family business. And that is something that I can definitely relate to. Growing up in Waynesville, my parents ran a bed and breakfast and a bookstore. And it is funny that, I would not consider my parents like the best business people. And my dad would 100% agree. He would even, he had a bookstore because he loved books. He didn't, this was probably like it's like an alcoholic running a bar, like, I mean, it's it's not, maybe not the best like business platform, but yeah, he just loved books. But there was just that kind of natural environment of like, hey, you're going to go somewhat like run the bookstore for a couple hours. And, when somebody comes in, you ask them, how they're doing. Can I help you with anything? And, I think that is such a good lesson to learn at an early age, is just the importance of how does this work? And again, they weren't the best business people, but it is fun to be able to see business getting run, because even if you're doing it poorly, there's a ton of lessons to take away from that. Like, I mean, again, they're doing a lot of things right? I mean, just everybody's kind of figuring it out in the small business world, and there's just such a such a plethora of lessons to take away from being in that environment at an early age. So that's really cool to hear.
Yeah, I agree. And you brought it up, when I was 17, my senior year in high school, I had some run-ins with the law too. And I remember, it was underage drinking, stuff like all alcohol related misdemeanor stuff. But I remember how isolated I felt.
Yeah.
And, you've disappointed your parents. Your friends who didn't get caught are like, oh, damn, you got caught. That sucks. And kind of treat you like an outcast for a little while.
Yeah.
And I remember the only person who made me feel okay was, a girlfriend of mine's dad, who was a lawyer, who'd been doing it for 25 years. You walk in to talk to him. I don't think he charged me or anything. He was a friend of a friend, but he says, this shit happens all the time. Don't these cops tell you what to do? You're at a hotel party when everybody's drinking and they bust you or whatever, made me feel like it's okay. This is what youth is all about. People make mistakes. No big deal. We'll take care of it. And I still try to be that person. When somebody walks in my office, one of the first things I want to tell them is, this is so common. You're not alone. You'll be on a docket with 25, 45, 100 people that have done something very similar to what you've done, and we're going to get you through it. And that's a big relief for a lot of people. That's all they need to hear sometimes.
Yeah, it is. I mean, and I think it's such a good way to establish that human connection with clients. I mean, I just think that there's it's so embarrassing for a lot of people to share this, whether it's, for some people it's a speeding ticket, for other people it may be, a DWI or something, much more serious. But whatever the issue is, I think that there's a lot of embarrassment at all levels of those charges, sharing that with somebody else. And so I think just reassuring people that, this happens to all kinds of people. This is, I kind of, the way that I couch it is that unfortunately, this is not going to be the worst thing that ever happens to you. It's just this, it's this blip on the radar that people get through. And I think, it can feel so overwhelming, and it's caused so much anxiety leading up to that point that it just feels like, this is just the worst thing that I've ever done, as often those kind of situations feel in the present moment. And just reminding people like, hey, there's bigger problems that are, unfortunately gonna come into your life. I mean, this is something that we can work through, and all kinds of people deal with. So,
right.
Well, and, what was, go ahead.
And I was going to say, and it's not just one particular type of person we see, it's all walks of life. I mean, I have had judges from other states call with some real problems, that have been doing it their whole life, but they come down to the Outer Banks and maybe they have an open container in the car, but they don't know anybody here. They can't make it go away, and they call me, and they're freaking out just like the 17-year-old me who got the drinking ticket. They think everybody's gonna find out, and they'll never be able to show their face at a social event again. It's fun to be part of. It's really important that there's people like us who actually care, who are involved in it.
Yeah, I do. I think that it's true anywhere that you get to see clients from all walks of life, but I do think it's almost next level when you're in a tourist environment. So Asheville very much has that vibe. There's people coming in from all over the country. And so you are getting to truly see people, I'd say, from like kind of all different backgrounds and walks of life in all parts of the country. And I imagine that the Outer Banks is very similar in that vein. Like, I mean, you've got local people that are, getting charged just like everybody else, but I'm sure that there's a lot of that tourist element.
Yeah, for sure. I think we have different seasons, but yeah, we're the summer.
That's right. Yeah. That's
Yeah, but I think in a given week we'll go from having 30,000 people here to 1 million come through in a week. So
so crazy.
it's pretty crazy, but it's a good place to be. I've
Yeah.
really enjoyed being here.
Yeah, I guess in terms of, what ultimately kind of led you down the path in law school towards criminal defense. And then, obviously it kind of makes sense as to why you ended back up in the locational region that you're practicing in currently. But maybe just kind of that transition then from law school into your firm, kind of describe what that looked like.
So I knew I wanted to come home, and I thought I could probably land a job at the DA's office if I couldn't work on my own. But from the outset, even before I started law school, I just wanted to work by myself. I just wanted to hang a shingle and be a lawyer. I mean, most lawyers don't. They want to get a job with somebody else. So I graduated in 2010. My wife is from Perquimans County, which is the neighboring county to Pasquotank. So Elizabeth City, the neighboring town, is Hertford. That's where she's from. Her dad has a bunch of rental properties there. So she found and took a job when I was finishing up my final year of law school. So she came back, moved into one of his rentals, and I knew that that's where I was going to go and study for the bar. While I was there, my dad calls me and says, "Hey, my buddy wants to talk to you." And his friend was a hiring partner at the biggest regional firm we have. I mean, it probably maybe covers 12 counties or so, but they have 11 lawyers maybe now, but that's huge for around here.
Oh, it is. No, I think, yeah. I mean, for a little guy's firm is what I call what we do. That's a big firm. So
that's right. So their criminal practitioner had just gone out on his own. So they needed somebody to fill that spot. And here I am, fresh out of law school. The economy's bad. Nobody can get a job, and they offered me one after I met with them. And, I talked to my dad about it. I said, "This isn't really what I want to do, but I'll try it." And he says, he thought they were such great guys, and they really are well-respected, old school firm from like 1900. So I went with them for about 6 months, and I was miserable. And I was miserable when I walked in the door, just because I felt like I was kind of, going against what I wanted to do to satisfy somebody else. So we parted ways after about 6 months, and I went back to the small town of Hertford and hung a shingle because that's where my house was. We just had a baby, so, we had a small child in the house, and we bought a foreclosure and had plans to fix it up and flip it. So for a few years I was there. And I was doing everything I could to get money coming in the door, writing letters for all the traffic tickets that were coming through. Because I mean, it was one of those towns where it's 70 on each north and south end, and it turns 55 in the particular county I was in. So, it was what everybody likes to call a speed trap. So I was hand signing all these letters and customizing with the trooper's name in it and where they were stopped and stuff, thinking that maybe that would give me an advantage. And,
I'm sure it did. I think that's awesome.
It did. And I did a few foreclosures for their local bank, and I did some stuff I probably shouldn't have done, just because I was learning on somebody else's dime. But
I'm laughing because I've been there. So that's
I was calling firms in Raleigh to see if they'd send me CLE material because I found that they did a CLE for the Bar Association. So anyway, then I moved back to Elizabeth City. We bought a house there. I set up a firm there, and, I was working privately, but I was still taking court appointed cases. So this is court appointed cases for the first judicial district, which is a 7-county district. It covers Dare, Currituck, Pasquotank, Perquimans, Gates, Camden, and Chowan County. So from Edenton all the way around to the beach. It's like half of the Albemarle Sound you have to travel around to get from one courthouse to the other. And I think 5 of the 7 you can get to by water. So I was doing a lot of that. And after, I would say 5 or 6 years, I took all my intake forms from all my clients and started looking at my paying clients. Where were they coming from? What county were they getting ticketed in? And I think it was maybe 75% were Currituck and Dare County, which is the best place to be. It has the best school systems. It's expensive as hell. But, if you're going to be a lawyer around here and you don't want to do court appointed for the rest of your life, this is the place to make your name, right?
Yeah.
And so I opened up an office here. I started doing that. And I started taking a lot more cases here and advertising a lot more here with, online advertising more than anything. And my business continued to pick up. And then I bought a house here that I was going to convert to a law office, but it had like a loft upstairs. And I said, well, shit, I can just stay up there, for a while until I can afford a house. And anyway, I ended up converting the whole house with my personal home and renting an office about a block away. And that's where I've been ever since. I still have a house in Elizabeth City. We Airbnb that, but we're here for the kids. We're here for the environment. It's wonderful. The people here are great, and the money's really good. So it's kind of the ideal spot to be if you're from the area. I think if you just moved here and you didn't know anybody, it might be difficult to really get your feet under you. Maybe take a decade or so, but it's been great for me, and I'm really happy here.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think, a lot of good takeaways from that. I think that one of the, beautiful things about, kind of finding your own path is just the freedom that, kind of being in your own space allows. I worked with another lawyer here in Asheville for about a year out of law school, and he was doing a civil practice, real estate and civil litigation and criminal defense. And so I was doing criminal defense, I would say primarily, and that's where the love was. But then there was this kind of like mishmash of other things. Definitely did a number of foreclosure hearings. It was that time of life, 2009 is when I graduated. So yeah, we were both out in that, like, massive boom of foreclosures going on all over the country. And, I was thrown into a bunch of different things, and I didn't really like the, just constantly feeling the stress of being unprepared. Like, there was just so many different avenues, that I was trying to kind of like get up to speed on. And that really just left me feeling uncomfortable. Now, when I went out on my own, just like you, I kind of did some of that on my own, like you're just trying to take what you can in order to survive. But I also think that there's just once I went out on my own, there was such a just excitement level in terms of like trying different things to get the phone to ring, whether that's like, doing certain things on the letter side of things. We tried all kind of stuff with the letters, brochures and business cards, business magnets, and, it was just, constant, but it was fun. It was a lot of fun trying all those little things. And again, I'm assuming some of that worked, some probably fell on its face. It's hard to tell. Like, I wasn't very good at like trying to do the analytics of anything. It was just like, hey, let's try this thing. let's just figure it out here as we go. But there was just such a freedom of both, kind of what you wanted to do, but also in terms of the marketing side of things. To me, there was just a lot of freedom in being able to really try different ways of growing the business. And that was really brought a lot of energy into the kind of business, which was just me at the time. But like that just brought a lot of, energy into that kind of how do we get this thing to grow. And so I think it's cool to hear you talk through that, because I think so many young lawyers, I think, get just frustrated with, you have this almost like social media vision of everything where everybody is successful all around you. And it's like, why can't I figure this out?
Right.
It's like, because you've only been doing it for 6 months. Nobody figured it out that fast,
Right.
like that's not how it works. You gotta,
Yeah.
struggle and continue to struggle. Like, it never completely lets off. But I think in those first few years, 2 or 3 years, it's just a, chaotic mess, and I think that there's probably ways to fast track that and streamline things a little bit faster, but I think a lot of it is just being in the being in the muck and trying to kind of figure out what, throw it against the wall, see what sticks. I think that's how it goes for most of us, kind of figuring out where to go after we hang that shingle. So yeah, it's just good to hear that process, and then ultimately growing to a place where you are able to become more selective. And some people get more selective with practice areas. Some people, like it sounds like as in your case, get more selective about location, right? Instead of covering, 7 counties, I'm covering 2. For me, same thing. Originally when I like kind of focused in a little bit more, it started more locationally versus charge type. It was just like, I'm driving all over, but I'm only able to get one case, in this county that's 2.5 hours away every couple of months. And it's, I'm going out there for a continuance. Like, this is just not, it doesn't make sense to keep doing this. But I think that journey is just such a cool thing to hear, because I think a lot of us have felt that, but I do hear a lot of younger lawyers that are just like, man, I just don't have it figured out. It's like, yeah, you're not supposed to. Yeah.
And it's going to take a while.
That's going to take a
I
while.
remember an older lawyer pulling me aside, and this was a traditional old school criminal defense lawyer who had made more money than most lawyers do in their career, just because he had that cool about him. But he pulled me aside and he said, "Listen, don't stub your toe," which basically meant don't cheat on your wife and get arrested or disgrace yourself in the bar. He said, "And just keep working. It will come. Your day will come." And in the 15 years that I've been doing it, or, I've watched lawyers, and it seems like everybody who doesn't do those things, who doesn't really lose the trust of everybody around them, they peak around, 50, from 50 to 60, and they have all the money they want, and they plan for their retirement. If you can just hang out and hit that stride and plan properly, you have a good life, and I'm creeping on it. I'm 46 now. My practice is as good as I need it to be, financially. And I've almost got it honed to exactly, I'm doing what I want to do, turning away the clients I don't want, so I'm waiting for that peak, but I can see, the hill. I can see the top of the hill.
Yeah.
You just have to keep on going, and the young lawyers do need to hear that, especially. You were talking about the letters and all the marketing things. I remember when people would call me and didn't get a letter from me if they were people I knew. And I'd say, "Can you bring me what you did get?"
Oh yeah, no, 100%. That was so good.
I saw one guy one time. He put his business card on the letter, but he used a gold paper clip. I was like, "Damn, that's genius!" It makes him look gold paper clips, and he's a better lawyer. There's little bullshit things you see him.
Oh yeah.
I'm gonna try that. That might work. I'll stand out from the crowd.
Yeah. No, I laugh about that. I've shared several times on the podcast. It's the NC DWI Guy podcast. And I started using that, terminology for myself, a year, within a year of opening my firm. It was first the Blue Ridge DWI Guy, and then the Asheville DWI Guy. Sent the letters of request off to the bar to get approved for these things. But it was the NCDWI Guy by name long before like there was any understanding of what was going on with DWI cases, and so some of that is, fake it until you make it. But some of it is just, I do think you've got to like try to find your identity in terms of like, what are you trying to kind of provide to the client from a expertise side of things. And I think the more that you start pushing in that direction, it kind of automatically then fuels that particular practice area. But yeah, for the longest time, it was market, it was just, how do we kind of figure out this marketing strategy, what, and it was a lot of trial and error. I think that was a big part of it.
Right. I think even though a lot of that stuff doesn't work, the stuff that does work ends up turning into referrals later on. And that's where, you've really done yourself some justice, is just by like doing good work for the people you don't know. And then, you basically have foot soldiers in your community who are going to send people to you, even if you've forgotten that person, but you get a call and, so-and-so said they used you, and they're not going to balk at your fee. They're
Yes,
not going to go
100%.
with the
Yeah.
cheap guy that sent the letter who can do it for $29 or whatever. They're going to go with the recommended lawyer, which is, really what we're all working toward, is to be the
Yeah.
person that people call when they have a problem.
Yeah. And I think that that's one of the things that is so undervalued in a world where it seems like, you can generate calls online with advertisements. We generated calls, I'm sure both of us, in very similar veins, like through letters, through website, through whatever kind of media opportunities there are. I mean, there's different ways that you can go about getting the phone to ring, but the best calls are those referral calls. They're ready to hire you. They don't care what your fee is. They come in with that kind of trust already built up. You don't have to really kind of earn it in the same way that you have to earn it with like a cold potential client call. And I think that's another reason why younger lawyers can get frustrated, or even, I used to think to myself, like, why aren't these other lawyers that have been doing it here forever taking advantage of these advertising opportunities? And then, I kind of realized several years afterwards, like, because they don't have to, they don't need that. And it's expensive. So like, I mean, they just, they're living, like you kind of just described, their best life. They've got plenty of cases, they got plenty of clients that are reaching out to them. And so I do think, again, from a longevity standpoint, that you got to play the long game. And if you play the long game the right way, that referral business just becomes like a snowball of callers down the road. It sounds like to me, like, just based on your family being in kind of long established in the area where you practice, and kind of knowing the kind of local flavor, so to speak, being invested in the community. It seems to me like that's kind of treating people well. That's a kind of part of the firm identity, is like, I'm somebody that is a staple of the community. This is a uh, you know I'm connected, with the community at large. I understand the local court system. What is kind of, if you had to kind of give some advice in terms of how to build your business for the long term, for the long haul, what would that look like in terms of, the way that you have conversations with clients, or in terms of some of the practices? Because I think for the first couple of years, we're kind of feeling our way through things, and how do we get clients to call in? But, currently, what are you doing in terms of kind of keeping that forward momentum moving in the right direction?
Well, the uncle that I told you about, when I graduated and started work, he said, let me give you a piece of advice. And he didn't give a lot of advice. He was an old Marine, so, very few words.
Tight-lipped.
Things he did say, he never forgot. He said, you're going to walk into the clerk's office and you're going to think you have a law degree and that these girls don't know what they're doing, and you're the lawyer and you're going to tell them what the law is. He said, if you do that, you will be one of the most unsuccessful lawyers wherever you go. He said, you go in there with hat in hand and you tell them that you don't know shit because you don't know shit, and you ask for help. And you remember, don't be that guy. And basically, so many words. And I remembered that being one of the most important lessons, because I have seen time and time again young lawyers who come in, like peacocks. They think they're from somewhere, they've got a degree from somewhere, and they're going to be the next, Jerry Spence or whoever. And they piss everybody off. And they advertise that they're this aggressive lawyer, and they act like they're the aggressive lawyer, and they burn out really fast. They end up going somewhere. Somehow the system works those people out. So my probably first piece of advice is just don't do that. Come in, be kind to everybody, your staff, the judges, be respectful to, the clerks, be super respectful to, because they can probably hurt you more than anybody, because you're going to make a lot of mistakes and they can help you fix it. Always treat your clients the way you want to be treated. Remember, they're coming to you for help. I mean, like the golden rule, but people forget it. They feel important, and they feel like, their time is so valuable, or that they don't have time for the petty stuff that this, defendant did, this potential client did. And on the phone with them, maybe they've got something else they need to do, and they just treat them like crap. But that really can impact you as a lawyer over the long term, because in these small communities, especially, people talk. I talked to that guy. I mean, he was a real jerk, and said, "Oh, I was going to call him too because I got a similar problem." Because birds of a feather. People,
Yeah.
if people are smoking pot, getting busted with weed, they know the other people who are smoking pot and getting busted with weed. So I think it all goes back to your reputation. Just protect it as much as you can, and you have to do some of these things and be kind, but just be kind. I mean, don't do it just to kiss ass. Just try to be a better person. That's what you have to do, as a professional generally. I think, just don't be mean to people. Remember, everything can come back and get you, and think before you speak. Just those basic life lessons that are so much more important to us, because, we deal with people's worst problems, and we know lawyers generally who work in the courthouse, we know everybody's dirty little secrets, and we have to be trusted.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Kind of makes me think there's I can't remember who it was. One of the local store managers here at Chick-fil-A was talking about the core four that they use. And I'm not even going to remember all of these, for teaching employees about kind of initial contact with a customer. And it's basically eye contact, smile, and connection. And I can't remember the fourth thing, but the connection point is basically like, if you can quickly mention something about like that customer's clothing that they're wearing, or just compliment something, I love your hair. So whatever it might be, like trying to kind of build a connection. And it's like, man, if you can think about this at like the fast food level, where your interaction is literally like just a few seconds, and then kind of on to the next thing. But it is amazing how that little piece can really stand out as like, man, that's kind of crazy that person noticed that, or like they've commented on my pin that I'm wearing, whatever it might be. I feel like with clients, we kind of get into like a fast food mentality with clients sometimes, of like, tell me your problem, okay, here's the solution, all right, next, and then you move on to the next problem to solve, fire to put out. And I do think that the best lawyers, in terms of, from a business perspective, the best lawyers from, in front of a jury, or the lawyers that are not, it's funny to watch different lawyers do voir dire. And, some lawyers, it's very like almost like a laundry list of questions of like, is this potential juror suitable for my case or not? And then you've got the lawyers that really know what they're doing at Superior Court. And I don't pretend to be one of these lawyers, but there's lawyers that basically are using that as an opportunity to gain connection with jurors and just have a conversation. And it's like, man, that's such a better process of how to conduct this back and forth questioning. And I think with clients, we just lose that sometimes. We're so, we're trying to get into the factual scenario, and it's important to do that. I don't want to downplay like the importance of having a thorough consultation. But I think there's just been so many times in my individual experience where you start to have a conversation with a potential client about a hobby that they have, or about their kids, and the importance of how this charge is going to impact their family. And so you start asking questions about that, where you can just feel the relief from the client's end of like, this lawyer cares about the impact this is going to have on me. I'm more than just a number. I'm more than just like a dollar sign to this person. And again, I don't think you can really fake that. I really think it only is going to work if it comes across as genuine, like you just mentioned. But I think even for people that would want to have that kind of genuine conversation, I just think we forget to do it sometimes. Like, I think that we get so caught up in the day to day that we just lose that. And critical. I think if you want to give a client a wow experience, you have to be able to establish that personal connection with them.
Yeah, I agree. I think about, my daily routine is Tuesday, I go to court here in Dare County. Wednesday is in Currituck, and Thursday is in Dare again. That's just district court. And of course, we have Superior Court on some Mondays. But on those days, I go to court, I come back, I get lunch, and I come back in my office and I see my call list. But at the same time, I'm watching the clock. If it's 2 o'clock and I've
Yep.
got 15 people to call back, then sometimes I find myself watching the clock while the person is talking and looking
Yes.
at my
Yeah.
call list and saying, I've
Yep.
got to get off this call. But I have to make myself take a breath and say, these other people are going to have to wait until I have time. I cannot cut this call short just because I have more people to call.
Yeah.
And that, like you said, it's critical, or you're just going to have to stay late. I mean, I've had nights when I'm here at 7:30 or 8 o'clock at night calling people back, and people are not offended that it's dinner time. They're relieved that you called them back most of the time. But I think my point is, don't call unless you have time to listen.
It's all good.
And I think so many lawyers, I think a lot of lawyers don't call anymore.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
if you can just listen to people, they're going to trust you a whole lot more. If you look something up for them, they don't know their court date and you pull it up and you tell them, you just, maybe went the extra mile that they needed you to go to really have faith in you as a lawyer. And if you're honest with them, even if you can't, quote, get them out of whatever they're in, they're still going to be happy with the outcome. If you are honest with them, you work for them, and you're up front from the get-go.
Yeah. I think that that is some of the best advice that I think a young lawyer or legal assistant even could hear is
Right.
just, don't make a phone call unless you have time. Like I always tell everybody at the office, like what we want the client to feel like when they call into the office is like they have unlimited time to explain their situation. And I think that if you don't kind of pressure cook the back and forth conversation, again, there's just a level of trust that comes from that. It probably wouldn't take that much longer to have that, maybe a little bit more thorough conversation. But I think from the client's perspective, it's again like this person is trying to get all of the information. This person is interested in hearing out, my complex situation. And I think that we've all been there in that space where you have this long list of people to call back, or this item of to-dos, and I'm trying to rush through, and I think taking a deep breath before the call and thinking, this is 100% where my presence has to be is so powerful. I think it's just such a cool thing. Not to get like too into Christianity here for a second, but I was recently watching a interview with Jonathan Rumi, who is the guy that plays Jesus in the series The Chosen, and they were asking him, like how do you play this role? What are you doing before each scene? Are you reading a certain section of the Bible? Like how are you getting prepared for this? And his answer was basically like, I just try to be 100% in the moment with the person that I'm doing the scene with, 100% present. And you can feel it from the show, like watching, how he's interacting with that person. I think presence is so critical for us as human beings. I think it's a real separator in terms of if you want to differentiate your business, not only from other law firms, but from other businesses. Being present with your client is killer differentiator, because most businesses don't build that into their system like that. They're trying to figure out ways that we can cut corners with time and how to get information faster. And so if you're just present with somebody, you're just in a different space than a lot of other businesses are. So I think that advice is just killer. And also on that front, and then I'll shut up, but like also on that front, I think that the idea that you've got to rush through 15 calls, is is problematic as well, because I think that that caller, the 15th caller that's on that list, whether you call them late today at 7:30 or tomorrow, is going to have had like a better interaction with you based on the fact that you're giving them unlimited time versus you got, the call back, but only spent 3 minutes and they felt rushed and they're like, man, I didn't get my question, I didn't get all my questions answered. So even the person that has to wait as a result of the fact that you're kind of being thorough with the callers that are kind of lined up in front of that person, they're going to appreciate the fact that they got to then have like that full conversation with you. So I think, yeah, 100% agree with that idea.
Right. I mean, that's our product. That's all we're selling as a service.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're not listening and not making them feel like you're going to help them, you're not, you're doing yourself a disservice and your client.
Yeah. Well, I think in terms of, obviously, a lot of things that we can kind of talk through in terms of big changes that are coming down the pike here in the next couple of months, years with e-courts and a lot of public defenders offices that are opening up across the state. But in terms of challenges that face the private practitioner criminal defense lawyer in 2024, what are some of the biggest challenges that you see as facing criminal defense practitioners?
Well, I think, in the entire legal realm, we're probably the safest from technology just because our job is enshrined in the U.S. Constitution. I think it's probably the only job that is, under the Sixth Amendment. They get the assistance of counsel, and that's what we do. So I think we're safe. I think technology is going to be both, a burden for us and a major benefit. I think that right now do y'all have it out there, the e-courts and Odyssey?
It's
and all
coming
that
into Buncombe and basically the western counties, all the way out to Cherokee in July.
We got it. It rolled out February 1st through 3rd or whatever.
Okay.
It is horrible. I mean, it is as bad as they were saying it was when it came to Raleigh. District court practice is it's just a waiting game where you end up standing around for 3 and 4 hours to talk to a DA who's hacking away at a computer and sending tasks to judges, and it's really, really bad. I think it will get better. I think they might have to scrap this whole system and go with somebody else and just bite the bullet and eat the $100 million they spent. But I also do federal practice, and that's a lot of electronic filing there. But their system is really easy to work with. Yeah, and it's never been a problem. And the training was short, and it's user friendly as hell. But this state system is really, really bad. But I'm thinking at some point we'll get past that, and working from your car or your house and filing papers and being able to access papers from your phone is going to be great for us. But it also might allow us more time to focus on the stuff that we need to focus on instead of running to the courthouse and filing papers or worrying about 5 o'clock because you can do anything after hours. We can focus on our clients like we were just talking about, and spending time with them and becoming real lawyers again, where we can actually try cases and litigate stuff in front of a jury, which I don't know what it's like there, but we're getting very, very few jury trials in Dare County and Currituck County. I mean, everybody's taking pleas. The DA's office doesn't have time or energy to try the cases. So I'm hoping that everybody will feel like we're in the matrix with all this technology, and the only way we can feel alive again is to get in a courtroom and argue. So, I'm not sure that will happen.
On that front, do both Dare and Currituck, are both of them in e-courts set up at this point?
So our whole district went in at the same time.
Okay. Yeah. Is there any, since it's the same district, maybe this isn't like quite as helpful, but are you seeing, success in one location that maybe isn't quite there in the other county? And if so, like, is there anything that you could give feedback wise to me? And this is very much from like outside perspective and without having a lot of personal interaction. We've had a couple of our offices in Mecklenburg and in Wake that, the attorneys there are dealing with the e-courts setup. I mean, and but is there anything that you can see as being, maybe not a perfect solution, but that helps in the e-courts process?
Well, I think, when you're dealing with county courts, the elected clerk really plays a major role in how much he ensures that his staff is trained, his or her staff is trained.
Yes.
I mean, you've seen it in counties, I'm sure. There's some clerks who they let everybody else do all the work and they don't bother to learn some things, So some of the smaller counties we're seeing that they don't know how to do certain things. And I had a conversation yesterday with a lawyer who you've interviewed, and he told me that, he submitted a consent order to a judge, and that the clerk says, I think this requires a hearing. I'm not going to send it to the judge. So, you've got an order that's signed by the DA and by the defense lawyer, and the clerk interjects and says, I think this requires a hearing. So you've got to call a judge, and the judge has to call the clerk and say, you can't do that. So you run into problems like that. And then you have some of these, Dare County is a great example. These girls have busted their tails to get everything right. Their boss, Dean, has brought in people from AOC, and of course, Tyler Tech has been there training them. But they're pretty miserable. So, you have to tread lightly with them. And if they do make a mistake, or if we make a mistake, you just have to realize that, this is not a great system. It's expensive. I'm sure somebody had a hell of a sales pitch, but it wasn't ready for prime time. So I think really the answer to your question is every county is going to be different.
Yes.
It's going to depend on staffing. It's going to depend on leadership. So you just have to go in knowing that you're going to, deal with different circumstances in different places.
Yeah. I feel like, again, this is very much from outsider perspective, but it just seems like there is so much, that kind of depends on the individual players to kind of be actively looking for items coming through the queue, if we want to like call it that. But the clerk's office, the DA's office, the judges, in terms of the people that we generally touch in the courthouse. And I think that is it's got to be a difficult thing to navigate, because there's no DA that is like going into the DA's office hoping to be like clicking buttons on a computer. There's nobody that runs for judge so that they can be like waiting, anxiously waiting for the next document to come up in their queue. And there's a lot of judges that probably just have, somewhat limited tech savviness because you didn't have to. Like, I mean, it just is not required as part of the job. So I think, that seems to me to be like a major issue, is how do you kind of get like a judge's office, DA's office, clerk's office to really be like, this has got to be like a humongous focal point of our concentration. Like, this is not just like how cases get moved. It's like, this is the pipeline. Like, we've got to figure out how to just keep pushing stuff out of the pipeline. And that I don't really know that there's been a good solution presented on that front.
Right. I don't even know how, if you have a case that's a priority for you, how to push it to the front. I mean, if you need if somebody's in jail and they shouldn't be in jail, how do you get that in front of a superior court judge? And nobody really knows right now. I guess you call them at home, tell them to go find it. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's going to be, I mean, it's interesting as that's rolled out. I mean, it's a wait and see game at this point, but yeah, I mean, I think it will inevitably improve in every spot. It's just, it's gonna be a miserable experience, I feel like, for most places.
Well, it seems like you already know quite a bit about it. I mean, you've done your research. I mean, you know how it works with the task and the queue and everything else. So you're better off than a lot of people, because we were kind of a wait and see, hoping that it would get postponed. And then when it rolled out, we showed up for the training, but they can't really tell you much in the training. You learn by doing, just like anything else. So you go in there and you make mistakes. And even when you're filing stuff, or even when I'm filing stuff now, you'll have options. You don't know what the right option is, and there's nobody to ask because nobody knows the answer. So you file and you hope for the best.
Yeah.
maybe they'll eliminate some of the steps, some of the clicks, some of the options at some point, and it'll be a lot more streamlined, like the CMECF stuff in federal court. But we'll see.
Well, we as we are kind of coming to a close here, Daniel, what would you kind of say about improving the relationship at the local bar level? This has been kind of an interesting question to ask some lawyers across the state, because I think every local bar has like very much a different flavor, county to county and jurisdiction to jurisdiction. So especially as e-courts comes, I feel like you kind of need maybe a more united front in terms of dealing with some of the e-courts issues. But generally speaking, a good local bar is such a healthy aspect of criminal defense. So what suggestions do you have for improving the criminal defense bar?
Well, I feel like, our entire district has one of the best, bars in the state, maybe.
That's awesome.
In the region. I don't know. We all get along, it seems. But I think there are a few things. Number one, there aren't many lawyers who are, at the race to the bottom. There's not a bunch of cutthroat lawyers who are advertising, like I said earlier, $29 speeding tickets. Everybody charges their own individual fee, and there are some lawyers that do nothing but speeding tickets, and but they charge their own fee, but they're not competing with anybody else.
Yeah.
And it just seems like lawyers here are competing with themselves. They're trying to make some money while at the same time provide a good service. So I think, I'm not trying to tell lawyers who are trying to be the inexpensive lawyer not to do it, but you don't want to be the dollar store. You know what I mean?
I agree 100%. Yeah.
And I think that's just bad for the profession and bad for the bar. I think mentorship programs are great if you can find them. I have a great friend who was the elected DA turned criminal defense lawyer who took me under his wing. He'd been doing federal defense for about 20 years. And for about 2 years, when he had a federal case, in order to get on the panel to do federal cases, I had to just go with him to court, drop what I'm doing, get in the car, go to Raleigh or Wilmington or New Bern and watch him work in order to, get federal cases. And he probably taught me more just about what we talked about at the beginning, just being a good person and trying to help people, not for the money so much, but just because that's what we're here to do. Those mentorships will teach these young lawyers not to do the things that we've talked about, and for all the right reasons. Let's see.
On that front, just real quick, do you have any suggestions for trying to establish that relationship as a young lawyer? Because I think it can be sometimes maybe a little intimidating to approach a experienced lawyer. I learned pretty quickly here in Asheville that you could ask dumb questions and be fine. There was a lot of people willing to help here in the Buncombe County Bar. And I reached out to Andy Banzoff and Al Messer pretty early on in practice routinely, and they were, always willing to share. There was never a feeling like I was wasting their time or, an inconvenience or anything. So, I mean, maybe part of that is just individual personality, but really appreciate all of the lessons learned from them. Do you have any advice for approaching somebody?
Well, I think the most important thing is just to introduce yourself. I was listening to an older lawyer talk about a younger lawyer who said, that son of a bitch came in my county and didn't even have the decency to introduce himself. And I know what the young lawyer did. He went in there feeling so out of place, so nervous. He didn't know the clerks. He didn't know he just went there to get his ticket done, whatever the hell it was, and get out of there unscathed, But these older guys, they play by a different set of rules. They want you to look them in the eye, shake their hand, and introduce yourself, right? So, and it's extremely difficult for a young lawyer. You're self-conscious and you just don't want to bother people, especially these old timers who have a name for themselves. So I think, you just have to swallow and just walk up and put your hand out and introduce yourself. And once you've done that, they'll remember your name because,
Yeah.
that's what they do. You can ask them anything under the sun. You can call them at home. They'll take you under their wing in any way possible. I've never had a lawyer turn me down when I've asked for a favor or to tell me about how to do something. So that's probably the best piece of advice I can give. It's just don't
That's
be.
so funny. I feel like I've talked with a number of lawyers across the state. I've lived this experience myself, but there are certain places that you can go where you feel like you get home cooked or you're just, like treated like an outsider. And I think that the mindset, certainly my mindset has always been like, well, that's just a county that doesn't appreciate people from another jurisdiction. But on the flip side, I think what you just kind of like communicated is like, yeah, but I didn't really do anything on my end to try to like break the barrier down. Like I was an outsider. And so I mean, it's funny. I've never thought of it that way before, but I do think that, going up and introducing yourself to members of the local bar, like that's such an easy thing to think about doing that with the DA or with the judge. But I can think of a number of times where I've walked into counties, all over the map where, it's just like, I don't know what I'm doing here. I'm just going to try to keep a low profile. And that was, in retrospect, just, kind of thinking about it in real time was the wrong approach. Like you want to get the local guy and just you go up to the local person. And now I've done this, I mean, routinely, as of, for the last few years. If I go into a courthouse for the first time, I immediately go to the defense bar and I'm like, hey, I don't know what I'm doing here. Is this a judge that like I should be in front of or not? And then, fortunately for the most part, you just get, hey, yeah, let me give you the ropes. Have you talked to this DA about your case? And it's crazy how quickly people are willing to, other criminal defense lawyers are willing to share with you. And so, yeah, I think that is a lot of times on the kind of incoming lawyer to break that barrier down. So that's great
Well,
advice.
everybody's been there, every single lawyer in the courtroom
Yeah.
walked in there for the first time at some point and
Yeah.
didn't know what the hell they were doing. And the ability to be able to admit that to others,
Yeah.
kind of takes everybody down a notch, and
Yeah.
they're in that, competitive feel once they realize, hey, this guy maybe needs some help, and
Yeah.
I'm certainly happy to help them. And I know that's the way it is here. I'm sure, you being in the western part of the state, I guarantee you have very, very similar older, senior
Yeah.
practitioners who
Yeah.
they just want to talk to you and help you if they can, or
Yeah.
just get to know who you are and where you're from.
Yeah. 100%. No, I mean, there's, and I'm sure that's true everywhere, but I feel like there's counties around Asheville. This is, I would say, probably not quite as present in Asheville, but in all of the counties around Asheville, there's, the attorney room is, filled with lawyers that have been practicing for 25, 30, 40 years. And again, that, they're just enjoying practicing law. And part of that
Right.
is conversing with the defense. I would say a large part of that is the conversations they get to have with other members of the defense bar and other people in the courthouse. Like that's part of the reason they're still doing it. It's that they could retire, but it's like, I wouldn't get to see all my friends if I did that. Yeah, this is the big part of it. So,
Well, Jake, what do you think? I went to a CLE when I was still in law school. It was an NCAJ CLE, and one of the 1 hour sessions was "There's Gold in them Hills" was the name of it. And the lawyer was from somewhere out west, and he talked to everybody there about maybe you don't want to be in Charlotte or Raleigh
yeah.
or Asheville or Greenville or Wilmington. Maybe you want to go somewhere that has only a population of 15,000 or whatever, and just
Yeah.
be that small town lawyer. And I've kind of done that. This is a
Yeah.
touristy area. There's a lot of people who come through, but what do you think about that recommendation to young lawyers who are coming out and think that they want to be in Wilmington because it's the beach or whatever?
Yeah. Well, I think it is fantastic advice. I think that it is really, especially if you have some sort of connection with that town. I think that there is this, you know, I grew up in Waynesville, just down the road. Again, obviously, it sounds like you're kind of hometown, um, uh, lawyer, and I think that that is such a cool part of practice. I really think it's important to bring your skills and expertise back to your roots, so to speak. If that makes sense from a family perspective and other
Oh
things.
yeah.
But I think 100% to me that if you are in criminal defense, and again, I can't speak to other practice areas, going to your hometown is just, or again, small town, even if you're from somewhere else, is just such a huge opportunity to grow a business. I think that there's not a lot of young lawyers doing that. And so I think from a competition standpoint, I can think of 3 or 4 counties around Asheville where the average age of the criminal defense bar has to be like 50 plus. I mean,
Well, that's what I was thinking about too. I mean, a lot of these baby boomers who are the bulk of the lawyers, I think, in the state bar, they're on their way to retirement. I mean,
yeah,
they're generally, I think they're around 70 years old, and they fill a lot of these voids in these counties, and they're not going to
yes,
be there forever. So I
yeah.
think, it's important for some lawyers to think about, maybe that's a place for me. Maybe that's the place to raise a family and make a name for myself. I mean, I think it's been great for me, and it sounds like it's been great for you as well.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And I think, I've had a couple of conversations recently on the podcast where lawyers have kind of talked about part of their growth strategy was basically kind of either buying out or taking over a long established practice. And I think that that is a really underutilized tool for younger lawyers that are coming into the profession of basically, again, not only introducing yourself to other members of the bar, but really trying to establish more of like a potential partnership with some of these people that have been practicing for forever. And, they are, uh, this is not true of everybody, but for some lawyers that have been doing it for a long time, they really don't have to be. And so I think that if you can kind of like, figure out what has made your practice successful, is there a succession plan here? Is this something that we could work together on some cases on? I think that's just like an untapped, I think it's a tough conversation to have with lawyers because it feels maybe a bit assuming, but again, if you've built up a relationship with a lawyer that's been doing it for a long time, I do think that there is, a lot of lawyers that just end up, kind of ultimately, they've hung the shingle and then one day they just take it down and it's gone. Like all of the equity and build up into that business, into the, phone number and, all of the phone number to me is just like a representation of all the referral business that's
Right.
generated by that firm. I think there's some real opportunities in smaller markets to really capitalize on a lawyer that's been doing it forever, their, equity buildup of that business, and that benefits both parties. So I think 100% that moving into a smaller market makes a lot of sense.
Well, you think about these lawyers, or these young people who are coming out of law school in the Triangle region. I mean,
Mhm.
being at Campbell, and they're hemorrhaging new lawyers out
Yep.
every single year, and a lot of those kids are really comfortable in Raleigh, so they want to stay there in Raleigh. And it's got to be really, really difficult to go out and hang a shingle
It
if
does.
that's
Yeah.
your
Yeah.
desire and that's your dream. And then you've got to kind of resort to some of these tactics that
Yeah.
we say could, ultimately cause you some problems down the road, or, get you kind of painted into a corner that you don't want to be in. So,
Yeah, I mean, it 100% got to be difficult in those big cities to build up a business, and I mean, if you don't have a referral business, you're doing the letters, and the modern version of the letters is, Google advertisements, Google local services, all of these, Facebook ads, whatever it might be, some sort of online advertising. And if you're in a big city, you're competing against a lot of firms that have a lot of money to throw at that. Like, I
yep,
mean, this
big
it's a
budget.
tough
Right.
place to kind of get to the top 3 of maps or into the local service space. Those are expensive advertisements. Whereas in a smaller market, there might only be 2 or 3 other lawyers that are even doing that. And so again, I think from that standpoint, it's a lot easier to be competitive, so to speak, even from like a just trying to get the phone to ring standpoint. I mean, it's a lot easier to do it. And again, from real life experience, it's a lot easier to get a potential client to call you when they only received 3 letters than when they received 40. And we've done it in both spaces. And you get a lot more of the clients that are only getting 3 letters to call you back.
That's right. Yep.
Well, again, appreciate everything, Daniel, in terms of all the conversation, all of the I would say really gems of information in terms of advice specifically to young lawyers. But I feel like a couple of your points have really struck home with me. That's why I love doing these conversations, because I get to learn so much through my guests. So I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your wisdom with the audience.
Well, it was great. And thank you for all you do. And for any of the young lawyers who do end up listening, you can always reach out to me if you have questions. I mean, I'm not in Wake County or wherever, you're from, but you can email me anytime, and I'm happy to talk through any problems you have. And
a lot of the issues are the same.
We'll be around for a while. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's great advice. And I would encourage people to do that. Obviously you now know that Daniel will give you full attention and time. He will not rush you off the phone based on the, the principles laid out. So you're going to get a good conversation if you give him a call. So appreciate it very much.
Yeah, Jake. Thank you so much.
Take care.
Yeah, man.